evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. We are just hours from the 2018 midterm elections, as you well know, and the noise levels are becoming almost unbearable. Suddenly everybody's shouting and posturing and trying to scare and bully you into voting for this or that candidate. It's all very loud. But pause for a second and consider what you are not hearing. What is missing from this cacophony? For starters, there is hardly a word about Russia. Remember that dastardly Vladimir Putin and the collusion plot that hacked our democracy? Whatever happened to that? And while we're at it, how about Brett Kavanaugh? Does that name ring a bell? What about his high school yearbook and his purported teenage drinking problem and all those gang rapes he supposedly committed? What about those? Those were the biggest stories in the world not so long ago, 24/7 on the other cable channels. Those stories were going to define this election. They were going to define this entire historical era. Everybody on television told us that. And now they are just fading memories. It turns out they were sideshows. The midterm elections were never going to be fought over Vladimir Putin or Brett Kavanaugh or just about anything else we spend most of our time talking about. This election, like all elections, was always going to turn on issues that actually affect the life of the country. This year, there are three big issues: immigration, the economy, and nationalism. The first is the most obvious. Immigration determines who lives next door to you. It determines who works in your office, who chooses your leaders. There is nothing more fundamental in any country than the question of citizenship. Whatever Donald Trump doesn't know, he definitely knows this. He's been talking about immigration for 3 years now. For all of that time, official Washington has been trying to make him stop.
The way Donald Trump has been conducting this campaign, attacking brown people, making up stories about possibly George Soros funding caravans that are still, 800 miles away to try to scare white voters.
In other words, shut up, racist. But Trump will not shut up. So they have changed tactics. The new line is, immigration doesn't really matter. The threat is hyped. Only dumb people and bigots care about borders. By the way, parties of both sides seem to believe this. Paul Ryan's office let it be known to Politico this morning that the Speaker of the House begged the president last night to stop yammering about this caravan from Central America and start talking about something important like Paul Ryan's tax bill. That's preemptive blame shifting, obviously. If Republicans lose tomorrow, Paul Ryan can point the finger at Trump rather than accept responsibility for not funding the wall that voters said they wanted. But it's also a ludicrous position to take because it's untrue. Immigration does matter. If, for example, Arizona and Texas go to the Democrats tomorrow, immigration will be the reason. Those were Republican states until the population changed. So no matter how much you lie about it, immigration is inherently important, and voters understand that. If you want people to stop worrying about the border, maybe you should secure the border. Then it won't be an issue. But people are also worried about other things that Washington doesn't notice or think is important. Here in Washington, the economy is synonymous with the stock market. Markets have boomed for 10 years. There are entire cable channels devoted to chronicling that boom. Here in Washington, the assumption is that the economy must also be booming. But the truth is that after a decade of stocks going higher, the effects, the positive ones, are still not very obvious outside select zip codes on the coasts. In Middle America, many young people understand that they will almost certainly make less than their parents made. That is a reversal of the American dream. They know they won't be able to buy cars or houses. They're not getting married. They're not having kids. Our current economic system makes it more difficult than ever for families to form. Our middle class is becoming unable to reproduce itself. Washington should be absolutely panicked about this. It is the most basic sign of failure, their failure. But nobody in either party seems to care. Their answer is just to import new families from other countries. So maybe it's not so surprising that young people say they like socialism, because what we have now is not working for them. And unless we fix it, we may get actual socialism, which will be a disaster. And that leads to the third issue of this election, which is nationalism. Now, despite what you are hearing day in and day out, nationalism is not a racial category. It has nothing to do with race or ethnicity. Nationalism is the belief that leaders ought to put the interests of their own countries above those of other countries. It's very straightforward. The president himself declared himself a nationalist the other night. Watch.
They have a word it sort of became old-fashioned. It's called a nationalist. And I say, really, we're not supposed to use that word. You know what I am? I'm a nationalist, okay? I'm a nationalist.
Trump's a nationalist. So in normal times, the President of the United States announcing that his main goal is protecting the United States would not qualify as news, because until about 10 minutes ago, every leader of every nation state throughout history has been a nationalist, almost by definition. Franklin Roosevelt was a nationalist. So was Abraham Lincoln. So was Mahatma Gandhi. So was Nelson Mandela. Nationalism has always been the rule. And why wouldn't it be? And yet suddenly, it's an abomination.
Nationalist. Use that word. We're going to talk about that word tonight. It is a favorite of the alt-right and is loaded with nativist and racial undertones. And globalists, well, globalists have been used as a slur of sorts, sometimes even against those in the administration, often with anti-Semitic overtones, which has happened to make the president come right out and embrace nationalism openly and claim that mantle. What has happened here?
What are you trying to say as President of the United States, that you're a nationalist? Americans know what that means. It's not even a dog whistle anymore. It's a bullhorn.
Dumb people repeating the same talking points. So the message is nationalism is now profanity, the word itself. Twitter and Facebook will surely be banning the term if they haven't already. But why? What exactly is going on here? Why are they so intent on stamping out not just the concept, but the very word? It's simple. What you're watching is people protecting their own prerogatives. Globalization, which is the opposite of nationalism, has caused an enormous transfer of wealth from the American middle class to what we used to call the third world, to other countries. American factories closed, but the jobs didn't go away. They just went to other countries. Now, some Americans got very rich from this. Many others got poorer. That's what happened. Rather than admit what actually happened, though, the people who got richer are trying to make the people who got poorer shut up and stop complaining about it. A borderless world has been hugely profitable for them. That's why they support it. Nationalism is their kryptonite, so they must stop it. So they scream racism and hope that nationalism will go away. Will it go away? Probably not, because the core idea is appealing to people in all countries over all time. People want leaders who are, above all, on their side. They always have wanted that. They always will want that. That's what we know. What we don't know is what's going to happen in the elections tomorrow. We won't even guess. Nothing would surprise us. But we know what the real issues are because it's obvious. And we're going to spend the next hour talking about those issues.